Hey, greetings everybody. GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. In our last episode, we kind of read a little shorty chapter, chapter 5 in the novel Sylvanas, and it's really all been building up her relationship with her siblings and how much she cares for them. So stay a while and listen to chapter 6, which should be the final. It should be like a turning point, I think, because it's the final chapter in the first part of this novel. So it's kind of like brings us to our quarter point. Sylvanas managed to elude both her parents the following morning by sneaking out early, before the sun, that meant so much to the Quel'Dorai, had peeked its head over the horizon, and the world was dull gray and damp with dew. Sleep had not provided much rest, so she welcomed the steely cold and raced through the dew-slick grass, leaping up as easily as one of the red squirrels into the boughs of the gold-leaf trees. She darted from branch to branch to branch, picking specific trees as targets and firing arrow after arrow into them. She returned about an hour after sunrise, flushed and panting, feeling that some measure of calmness had settled into her soul. A shouted refusal chased even that tiny gift away. "I will not do it!" Sylvanas stopped. So the words were said, finally. Alleria had grown tired of explaining, of deferring, of prolonging what everyone, including Sylvanas, had thought was inevitable, taking on the mantle of Ranger General. Sylvanas licked dry lips, then moved steadily forward. The shouting grew louder. "You do not dare refuse this, Alleria. It is a solemn duty, and I will not allow it." Sylvanas felt her face go carefully blank and her body hum with tension as she drew closer. "I will take my company and go," Alleria said, trying to bring down the heat of the conversation. "Only a few of us. You will still have the veterans. I don't want to command a kingdom's military. I simply want to contribute, to do something that helps people other than us, Mother. We are not the center of the world, and if we do not soon realize that, we will stagnate." The world around Sylvanas, so full of the sounds of nature and its creatures, had been chastened into silence. Her own footfalls sounded thunderous to her ears. She kept her pace steady. "I don't want to step into footprints made by others hundreds of years ago. I want to make my own path," Alleria pleaded. "My own destiny, and she will." "This is a terrible mistake, but it will at least be mine to make. You've never let me have a choice in anything. I've been nothing to you but an heir to a title. Even my name comes from your mother. I've never been me." "You have always been you. Do not wallow in self-pity." Despite herself, Sylvanas flinched. This was different. Her mother and her older sister had argued often before, but this time the verbal daggers bit deep, striking bone, crippling. "I don't belong." Alleria's voice had grown cold, as cold with resolve as her mother's was with contempt. "My soul feels trapped, Mother. I'm not running away from what you taught me. I will remember everything and I'll use it to help people, just like you do. I will just be helping different people." "You would turn away from us." "I'm not turning away from anything." Sylvanas' brow furrowed. She had never heard that tone in Alleria's voice before. So steadfast, so certain. So much like Father's. "I am turning towards something, and I hope one day you will see that. All I see is a stubborn child, willing to run off to adventure while leaving her people defenseless." "I'm not the only one of us who can shoot an arrow," Alleria said. "Sylvanas was already as good as I am years ago. Better. Better maybe than I ever will be." Sylvanas stopped. The siblings loved each other and did not shy from affection, but she had never heard Alleria praise her. Alleria thought her the better archer? What was even more stunning to Sylvanas was that her mother didn't disagree with Alleria's words. "It does not matter if she is the better shot. Sylvanas does not have the temperament for leadership. She is not dedicated enough. She has had countless opportunities to gain allies at court, and she has squandered every one of them through foolishness and mischief." Heat flooded Sylvanas' cheeks. Her mother was obviously referring to last night. "Now you grasp at straws. She has Haldoran and Lorthamar on her side, Many of the Farstriders appreciate her distaste for formalities and pretense. I cannot think of a single challenge Sylvanas has faced but not met. Let her turn her mind to leadership and you will see her exceed your expectations. She is the Ranger General you are hoping for, not me. Sylvanas heard quick footsteps, but she didn't draw back. Alleria, normally so focused, was so intent on escaping the argument the two almost bumped into each other. Alleria was flushed, but at the same time looked somewhat calmer and more resolute than Sylvanas had ever seen her. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then Alleria said, I meant what I said about you. Sylvanas took a quick, sharp breath. Alleria turned to go. The future Ranger General, the epitome of stillness an instant before, shot out her hand and grasped that of Alleria. I like how they call her the future Ranger General now. For a moment they stood, neither looking at the other. Sylvanas facing her mother, poised to move forward, and Alleria turning her back on her. Their fingers interlaced, and each woman held on tightly. There were volumes of unspoken words in the gesture. Then Alleria gave a final squeeze and released her sister's hand. Sylvanas felt shaken, as though the earth had trembled beneath her, and in a way it had. The warm feel of her sister's hand lingered in her palm as she stepped forward to face her mother. I will forgive you, Alleria, but not now. Larissa's voice was harsher than Sylvanas had ever heard it, and yet it was somehow softened, shaped by grief and disappointment, but not anger. She stood with her back to Sylvanas, her body rounded, drawing in on herself. Sylvanas closed her fingers around her palm, as if she could grasp the echo of Alleria's touch, and hold it for an eternity. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. It's me, Mother. Before her eyes, Larissa changed. Her back stiffened, straightened, became the posture of a soldier, not a mother. And when Larissa turned around, Sylvanas saw on her Ranger General's face the dampness of tears and the implacableness of resolution. And suddenly the ghost of her sister's grasp dissolved as surely as night mists in daylight, and all the warmth, love, and strength it had imparted vanished with it. When Sylvanas spoke, it was with a fierceness equal to her mother's, but without hint of the pain that drove its vitriol. I may be your second choice, Mother, Sylvanas Windrunner said, but you'll see that I am not second best. That one's highlighted a lot as well. The days passed as unmoved by the turmoil in the Windrunner household as they had been by the family's joyful hours. Alleria selected her rangers. Verissa was inducted into the Farstriders. Larissa informed the Farstriders that Alleria had been given a new mission. Instead of becoming Ranger General, Larissa had decided that it was time for the Farstriders to reclaim the meaning of their name and to once again look to the world beyond their borders. Therefore, Sylvanas would become Ranger General in Alleria's stead. It clearly stung Larissa that none of them seemed surprised, that in fact many seemed pleased. Sylvanas, her mother announced, would begin her training once Alleria and her group had departed. Virath, always the ray of hope in the family, returned that same day from Silvermoon with the news that he was now officially a royal musician. Virath, ever the diplomat, had accompanied his son back to the spire. He had with him several bottles of sun-touched reserve wine gifted to him by Anasterion himself. Virath claimed it had been cellared for so many years that the dust made everyone sneeze when it was brought up. Sylvanas rolled her eyes, then looked at the vintage, and allowed that her father might not be exaggerating after all. The party was the perfect diversion. In the afternoon, the spire would host a small group of friends and relatives, and at twilight the guests would depart, leaving the family to spend the rest of the evening alone together. There seemed to be a slight thawing of the iciness that had existed between Alleria and their mother for the last, years now. Pleased as she was to see it, Sylvanas could not help but wonder what acquiring the title of Ranger General might mean for her. Verissa veered between sorrow at seeing her sister go and clear relief that a decision had been made and that arguments had finally stopped. Virath seemed overjoyed with his new role, less because he was sought after, than because it placed him in a position where he could train some of the promising newcomers, though Sylvanas still thought of their conversation on the shore, and what feelings were hidden beneath his smile. And Sylvanas? Despite her mother's belief that she wasn't dedicated enough, Sylvanas took the responsibility very seriously indeed. As she had told Virath that same night on the beach, she hadn't felt challenged by simply being a Farstrider. She was confident that if nothing else, her mother would make her training as grueling as possible, and odd as it might have seemed to others, she found herself looking forward to it. Virath did not wear his robes of state that evening, but rather purple silk breeches, leather boots, and a white shirt open at the throat. Larissa, too, was out of her normal uniform of light leather armor, wearing a simple sky blue dress that suited her startlingly well. It made her seem softer somehow, more than the armor, more than the formal gown. How might they all be different, Sylvanas wondered, if Larissa had not been so driven and bent on driving others, if their world had been gentler. If Larissa had not inherited the role of Ranger General, might this smiling woman in the sky blue dress have been the mother the Windrunner children loved? But such reveries were foolish. The only one of them who had known true gentleness from their mother had been the last of them, Lyrath, who had not taken the path his sisters had, and so was not the recipient of Larissa's sometimes too intent focus. Sylvanas was glad he had been the one to walk that path. Lyrath might think he wanted to be a Farstrider, but it was obvious he had been born to be something different, a balm to others, not a defender of them. She could not bear to have seen Lyrath grow up like his sisters, tempered by the harshness of Larissa's forge of will. Alleria was in full uniform, as were the handful of her friends who would be departing with her, Virana, Relian, Auric, and Talthrassar. The rest of the Farstriders had come as they wished, all casual, all friends. The focus was on Alleria and her unit, of course. Sylvanas smothered a grin as a few young women from Golden Mist Village came forward, professing how terribly heartbroken they would be to see the eldest Windrunner child depart. "What's so funny?" Eldron asked, slipping up beside her. Lorthamar, too, was approaching to stand next to Sylvanas. She had been more relieved than she cared to admit that neither of them had been asked to accompany Alleria, or if asked, had declined. They were still here, and the trio would not be disbanded, and for that she was grateful. "It's the Salinar girls," she said. "From their reaction, you would think they were the ones losing a sister. I don't think they've seen her in years." She wrinkled her nose. "Look at how they're carrying on. Whereas the actual sister won't miss her at all. Ah, Lorthamar, you know that's not true. You'll miss her once your mother turns her attention to your training," Eldron said. "How could I forget the Mauler?" she retorted. "Don't worry. I've had a lifetime to prepare." At that moment the weeping girls curtsied and left. Alleria sighed, turned her head, and noticed Sylvanas regarding her. Sylvanas rolled her eyes, forcing Alleria to stifle a laugh, and looked serious as the next heartbroken soul who wanted to look good in front of Larissa and Virath Windrunner lamented their daughter's departure. Sylvanas would make her farewells at a more private time before Alleria left at dawn. Despite her nonchalance, she would miss her older sibling. Alleria was not as close to her as Lyrath or Varissa, but Sylvanas loved her, and there would be an emptiness where she used to be. "Are you truly all right, Sylvanas?" It was Lorthamar, who was always attuned to the emotions of those around him. She gave him a playful shove. "When am I not?" she quipped. Well aware of the lie, his eyes narrowed. "I will miss her, of course, but she will be back to visit. Mother will go hunt her down if she doesn't." When dusk fell, the partygoers thanked their hosts and departed, some to continue celebrating in a rowdier fashion elsewhere, others to head home to familial obligations. Some, it was true, left more courteously than others, but sun-touched wine was aptly named, and few could be condemned for being a trifle the worse or better for its consumption. When all but the Windrunners had departed, the celebration was moved from the base of the spire to the family's favorite place in Eversong Woods. They did not bring much with them: a bowl of fruit, a few more bottles of the sun-touched reserve, Lyrath's pipes, his lute, and a small handheld drum. Sylvanas had worried that the tension of the last several months would spoil this small, intimate celebration. She need not have been concerned. Lyrath's voice rose to the sparkling stars in the night sky, along with the fragrant scent of wood smoke, as the three sisters stepped forward into the wild, flowing dances they had improvised since childhood. Hands readily clasped, smiles warmed faces, lithe bodies honed from training and lives lived mostly under the sun and stars, moved with the grace of willows in an unspoken harmony. And at one point Sylvanas saw Virath rise, bow deeply to their mother, and extend a hand. Larissa smiled, and for a moment Sylvanas had her first real glimpse of the girl Larissa must have once been, before time and duties took their toll. She took her partner's hand, and they too began to dance on the soft grass, their moves familiar and effortless, and their eyes only for each other. Why did we stop doing this? Sylvanas wondered suddenly with a pang. Why has it taken Alleria's departure for us to come back here as a whole family? Hard on the heels of that thought was, will we ever be a whole family again? But Sylvanas fiercely banished it. In that moment of perfect lavender dusk, the fireflies appeared. Her eyes immediately met Lyrath's, and his face melted into a smile as bright as sunshine. Look, Lady Moon, he said, even the stars have come to dance. She could not help but smile in return. After Lyrath had finished playing, Virath insisted on refilling everyone's cups as he had a toast. When all were ready, he lifted his goblet. I am proud to be part of this remarkable family, he stated. Oh, that's the dad, I'm sorry. I am proud to be part of this remarkable family, he stated. My beloved wife is Ranger General, one who commands utmost respect from those she leads to victory after victory, and who has most certainly won my heart forever. The best battle I have ever fought, Larissa said, her eyes warm and bright. The easiest, certainly, Virath said teasingly. He turned to Alleria. My eldest daughter is embarking on a journey that will bring the outside world to the gates of Silvermoon for the first time in perhaps too long. She is someone who remembers debts owed, who will forge new friendships while cherishing those she already has. I am proud you are blazing your own trail, my child, but I hope you will always know the way home. Alleria stole a quick glance at Larissa as Virath spoke, but Larissa seemed at peace now that the decision was final. My clever girl, my fierce girl will follow in her mother's footsteps as the future Ranger General. Though you will no longer be at court quite so often, Sylvanas, do not think you have escaped me. I've come to rely on your instincts regarding strategy, if not your skill with diplomacy. Sylvanas laughed at that, and he gave her a wink before turning to address his youngest children. Verisa, our loving mediator, I do not think you know how much we rely on you to keep the peace. We are all, shall we say, strong-minded individuals. It's you who reminds us that we are also a family. I have little doubt you will turn the skill toward uniting many hearts in our kingdom. Verisa beamed, her cheeks flushed and her eyes shimmering with happy tears. And she does. Like her sisters, she makes a happy marriage with a non-elf. Which, we won't spoil that. And Lyrath, what can I say? You have been such a blessing to us all. Not only was our home, and now the most honored and exclusive places in Quel'Thalas, uplifted daily by your music, but your spirit is as pure as your voice. True beauty cannot be purchased at the bazaar. It springs forth without fanfare in nature, and comes from those rare few who can grasp something the rest of us cannot, and it is they who bring it forth into the world. You are the youngest ever to be given the rank of royal musician. I cannot wait to see where your skill and kind heart take you as the years unfold. Lyrath looked almost overcome. He seemed to be searching for words, and finally said simply, Thank you, Father. I hope I make you proud. They cheered, they toasted, the wine warmed them, but it seemed their mother had something to say too, and Sylvanas braced herself. No one in my family, including me, cares much for formal garb or lavish parties or jewelry, Larissa began. Sylvanas glanced at her siblings. They looked as confused as she felt. And I know that we have had our share of disagreements. Her eyes flickered to Alleria's. Alleria bit her lip. Please, Mother, Sylvanas implored silently, do not ruin this night. Larissa continued, but there was a moment in the not-too-distant past when I was happy for all of it. For formal gowns, which meant we were at peace and could savor frivolity. For my family who were all together, and especially for my children, who looked so beautiful on that night. I remember the gowns my girls wore, the formal robes chosen by my son as he performed before the royal court. So your father and I commissioned something so that Alleria will always remember that night and her family. Virath gave Larissa a pouch, and the Ranger General withdrew a necklace. It was a chain upon which hung 3 gemstones, a ruby, a sapphire, and an emerald. Larissa walked toward Alleria, the child who should have been her heir. 3 gems for my daughter, she said, and for my son. She smiled, her eyes shimmering in the faint light with what might have been tears. The artful chain that holds them together. I give you this, Alleria, to remind you of your family, even when your heart takes you far from us. And she does have that chain in some of the other books we've read. Alleria smiled. I will always remember you, no matter how distantly I might travel. Ooh, foreshadowing where she's going to go. Far away. It was a beautiful moment, and an awkward one, growing more uncomfortable as it stretched on. Then, with no warning, Lyrath launched into a bawdy and hilarious tavern tune about a serving girl with two suitors, a hunter and a soldier, and everyone started laughing the minute they heard the first few notes. Even Larissa clapped and chimed in at the call in response, but Sylvanas hung back, leaning against a tree, sipping from a goblet filled with the heady wine from a dusty bottle. Virath stepped beside her, and they clinked goblets as they watched the family, smiling and laughing, painted in shades of orange and yellow by the fire. It feels like more than Alleria leaving, Sylvanas said softly. Sylvanas' eyes went to Lyrath, laughing even as he sang. He used to be my little shadow, Sylvanas said, unable to keep the wistfulness from her voice. My little lord's son. Now he plays for a king. Change is inevitable, my dear child. I know, but I'm not sure I'm ready for things to change. The world does not care what we want. It is up to us to change as well. The only other choice is to be left behind and forever bitter. 53 times that line is highlighted. It's one of the highest we've seen. But I do like it. The world does not care what we want. It's up to us to change as well. The only other choice is to be left behind and forever bitter. Preach, Virath. He turned to her, smiling fondly. We're all feeling it, but you perhaps more than most. This night, it is the end of something. Tomorrow, something else begins. He turned back to look at the dancing. That's why I said what I did. Why we gave Alleria the necklace. We're old enough to know we must savor these moments because nothing lasts forever. And that is all right. I suppose, Sylvanas said with an exaggerated sigh, it would be boring if everything stayed the same. Virath laughed. That's my girl. And things are going to change because we're going to move on to the next part now. And it is not going to be... There's no point in Sylvanas' life where she has that again. A semi-normalcy. It's kind of a bummer. And it is not... I mean, because Sylvanas is an awesome character. And to get... this insight, we know some of the things that she's lost, but this really adds a poignancy to it. All right, cool. So we got another episode in the pipe 5x5. And even though this has been like not necessarily slow moving, but it's just been basically 5 straight chapters of a family dialogue and interrelationship and very mellow. It's like a quarter of a movie if a quarter of the movie was sent in like establishing just calm family relations. But I do think it's important for what's to come. So it's a lot different than anything we've read so far in any of our books because it's so idyllic and there's no real tension. I mean, there's mild, like slight tension like you'd see on like Gilmore Girls or something like that. But nothing, I don't know, I never really watched that show. I just picked something like vanilla that I could think of that seemed dramatic. But yeah, so we're going to continue on our next episodes, and this one's in the pipe 5x5. I thank you so much for watching, for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see everyone next time on Lore of Warcraft.